Hello, I'm Michelle Morgan. Welcome to WPKN's Mic Check, coming to you on WPKN every Sunday at 5:30 p.m. Our diverse roster of hosts present a wide range of topics for discussion, focusing on global, national, and regional issues and their effect on our local community. Just as the phrase mic check was used to mobilize people to create a human microphone during the Occupy movement, this weekly program amplifies our community's many voices and brings them to the airwaves. Mic Check is followed on WPKN at 6 p.m. by the Ralph Nader Radio Hour. And again, welcome to Mic Check. I'm Michelle Morgan, and I'm here this evening with my friend Eamon Linehan, who also goes by Eaink. And he is the coordinator for Free Artists New Haven. And I first met Eamon a few years ago working on a project. There was some mural making that was going on in New Haven, and I was really impressed by their vision for what it meant to come together as a community to make art. So I thought that they'd be a great guest tonight on Mic Check to talk about what arts activism looks like in a community, how that works outside of traditional economic models of funding around institutions and programs, and more generally just to get a discussion going about the future of arts organizing and community arts programming in Connecticut and beyond. So Eamon, welcome to the show. And again, for our guests, could you tell us a little bit about Free Artists, how you came to be, how you decided on the name, your mission, answer those kinds of questions?
Sure. Hi. Thank you. Thank you for having me on. Thank you. Free Artists, we've been together since 2012. And we really formed together at a local venue in New Haven, the People's Arts Collective, which has since been demolished for luxury apartments. Mm-hmm. And we came together on the name. Actually, first just going by art group, just came together on the name to really express that we were supporting one another. It's a place that artists and non-artists can come to support one another and really free ourselves to start changing our community for the better.
Great. And do you think of yourselves as a collective? How do you imagine yourselves as an entity?
I think Free Artists has the chance to be a collective again. I've been in and out of the grassroots sort of scene for many years, and right now it's not as many participants as it has been in the past. But we're also reorganizing to get back to a collective sort of space.
Great. And could you talk a little bit about some of the projects you've worked on over the past couple of years? You mentioned you started as a group in 2012, and just to familiarize the audience with the kinds of things that you do.
Yeah. So let's see. I think Free Artists... just starting as a space that people could come together and feel welcome and create art together, and then losing our community space to luxury apartments really galvanized us around really giving back to the community. To this point, we've probably affected the lives of around 2,000 to 3,000 young people across New Haven. We've done projects mainly around cultural justice and also using the arts as a tool to teach many different skill sets that could really benefit participants and members of the group alike. Mm-hmm. Skill sets like making murals or how to critique one another and take criticism, mm-hmm. As well as different trades like making clothing or how to even run a community art project that incorporates hundreds of people.
Mm-hmm. Great. And so you've also recently been working more, I know, on video projects.
Yeah.
Would you just talk about that for a second?
Sure. I think one thing I learned very, very early on was that we're entirely supported by the people who come out to the events, and myself not knowing how to write press release or know folks that are in the media. One thing I learned early on was that if you don't have those tools at your disposal, oftentimes the story doesn't get told. So I got my own pennies together, grabbed a little camera and started shooting, and have over the 5 years amassed all types of stories and interviews where I could from our projects or as we've been in the community. And lately I've been finally getting the chance to edit those back down into miniature documentaries telling all those stories.
Right. So I see this then as twofold. You both create these community projects and you work on these together, and you have skill sets that really empower youth to, like you said, figure out how to do things that they may not otherwise know how to do in a safer space. And also you've created this really fascinating documentary archive of that process over the past 5 years.
Yeah.
And does it feel like there's a vacuum in New Haven around this kind of programming for youth, or how do you see yourselves fitting in with other youth arts programming in New Haven?
I sort of always want to see more programming for youth. When I go downtown in New Haven, I don't see too much free or youth-based things for young people to do, or even people up in our age. Like, I'm in my 30s, and I don't see too much just free and constructive and creative things for people to do. So I always want to see more of that. In New Haven, I think there is definitely a lot of good organizing happening, and that there should be more. Can't hurt to have more.
And that's, you and I were talking about this about a week or two ago. As an adult, it's very hard to give yourself permission to participate in arts activism if you're not already inclined to being an artist. I think about the sort of pressures that get put on community members to organize in any any number of nonprofits or for different causes. And it's very hard to convince people who are over the age of 18, I think, or who are older adults, that doing some kind of arts activism is important. That if they're not already artists, that this is something they could still try out. There's a level of vulnerability that comes with being an artist publicly. If you're not used to thinking of yourself as an artist, how do you face the challenge of not just getting youth involved, but getting other adults involved who may otherwise be spending their time committed to other social justice projects?
Yeah. I think that it takes a certain level of commitment, and even from my own experiences in organizing in New Haven, it takes a lot of trial and error. I've definitely had just as much, if not more, failures organizing and trying to mentor young people and through folks our ages over the 5-year span than I've had successes with it. And I think it's always a learning process of what you're really ready to get out there and try, and then just being open and honest about where you're at with the people that you're trying to collaborate with.
Yes, because a lot of the people I don't want to talk about it as far as like servicing a group of people, but the people you serve or who are served by this collective are people who are traditionally on the margins for socioeconomic reasons, for racial reasons, not people who necessarily are have access to resources that New Haven or other Connecticut towns may otherwise provide if you're better connected. So the daily struggle of someone who is barely putting groceries on the table, or who is dealing with a father or a mother who's incarcerated, or have all these other challenges, like those challenges become the challenge to get them involved in programming like this is extra.
Right, and furthermore, I think when you're talking about with anyone about coming together and going after your dreams, like those challenges become exponentially more intense feeling. So it's super duper important to just be like really real and genuine with folks.
Do you feel like you wind up becoming a counselor of sorts and to the youth, or what's the mentorship relationship you found?
Definitely. I feel like I found myself sharing a lot more of myself than I could have even expected, and really committing myself and going in deeper than just some activity, which the programs and the activities are great, but like really digging in, with the young people that I'm mentoring, like where they're coming from, and like sharing where I'm at in a given day.
Mm-hmm. If you're just tuning in, you're listening to WPKN 89.5 FM out of Bridgeport. I'm Michelle Morgan, and this is Mic Check, and I'm talking this evening with Eamon Linehan, who is the coordinator of Free Artists New Haven, a group that brings community arts projects to the youth of the city in New Haven, and they've been operative for about 5 years or so, and we're just discussing the role of community arts programming, especially, I think, an interesting facet for you guys is doing that outside of traditional funding models. So, New Haven and other places in Connecticut and in New York, a lot of funding for youth programming goes through libraries, it goes through public institutions, universities, and there's we've talked before, you need a grant writer to write grants to fund your grant writer before you even get to funding the projects that you want to do. And that's very difficult to operate and create programming outside of those more traditional economic models around funding. So, at the basic line, right, what I'm saying is money is always difficult and always an issue. How does Free Artists fundraise? How do you operate outside of those traditional economic models?
Yeah, we were talking a little bit earlier about, WPKN, which is completely listener-backed and supported and volunteer-based. And that's really similar to how Free Artists is. Been over the past 5 years. The way we're funded right now, a lot comes directly out of pocket. Most comes directly out of pocket. Been just getting into figuring out how to do crowdfunding and things like that online, which has been another interesting portal and way to interact with both patrons of the programs and folks that want to back up and support what we're continuing to do. But it's sort of constantly pushing and funding and creating.
Yeah, one of the things that we were talking about was we're used to thinking of radio, community radio, as a product, for lack of a better word, right? You have you can get in your car, you can turn it on, you can tune in online, and music will come out, or public affairs programming comes out, and we're used to expecting that. So even if you're not a donator or you're not helping fund a project like that, you expect that that's a public service, that it's important and it's valuable. But with art, with like material and physical art, that's not necessarily something that we're as used to thinking about as a society. So we may really appreciate that there are public murals and that there are public art projects, but we don't, maybe this is just me, but it seems like there's less of an expectation that it's just going to be there. Or maybe we just take it for granted that's going to be there and we don't really think about how it shows up. But those are still usually very, maybe less so with murals, but with a lot of larger public arts projects and installations, those are funded projects. So what would it mean to have a community of people who might turn around and fund community arts projects that are not necessarily going to be the end project isn't going to necessarily be some like very large public art installation, but just to expect that that's one way that we foster a healthy society, and a healthy community is a community that's supported through arts patronage. And that's difficult to imagine, but I know that you are trying to like set up a program or a way for people to actually just pledge. Like, I'm just going to pledge a couple dollars a month to this group. Sure. It doesn't need to be a lot of money. It doesn't need to be a grant, but let's figure out a way that our community can help sustain creative people and projects inside itself.
Certainly, and taking a step back, and when I think of many of the conversations I've had either with collaborators through Free Artists or just all of my artist friends or creative friends, I feel this underlying message of what it would be to have something, any type of just regular programming available that is somewhere where we can just be creative, a space that we could be creative in, something to do that talks to, like, maybe this sounds a little hippy dippy, but like the real blood and like the heart of us, like our creativity. And so I totally think that there could be a way to make that shift, instead of the big funded community art project, but to have something that is readily available for folks.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot too, sorry, I wasn't speaking into the mic very clearly. I think as well about my own, so as an adult who has a creative practice and the struggle to manage my time so that I both can work and also find time to create. That was a journey through mental health issues for me personally, and I know for you as well. Like, you see yourself also as having a duty to, it's not medical, and it's, I asked you earlier if you thought of yourself as a counselor to some of the youth, but also just the role that mental health plays in the work that you do, I guess is the question that I'm really going for.
Yeah. I think it plays a very major role. You're asking before about, are we a collective? And I think first of all, in like the grassroots sort of forum, these things change size and shape almost constantly. And part of the reason why Free Artists isn't what it was in the past is, I had my own experiences with abuse and struggle coming back up to where I am now with my own mental health. So for me, it's like a good daily battle and fight to inspire myself. And that push has really galvanized me to keep keep going with Free Artists, because there was a time where we were a much bigger team, 20 to 40 people, and through disagreements and the way this organization has changed over the years, most of those relationships are gone. Mm-hmm. But I think it's for a stronger growth, right? All those folks are working on new dreams, right?
Yeah.
And so I think. Sorry, I'm sort of
no, that's okay. You're pointing out exactly how difficult it is for groups without funding to sustain themselves, and
sure,
the pressures that are put on individuals to do too many things. You know, everybody's got a lot of things that they're trying to do at the same time. People who tend to be go-getters not in the typical ambitious way, but in the, you know, community and social justice driven way, tend to have, you know, the self-care model that we talk about, and like, what does it mean to take care of yourself when you're taking care of others? How do we take care of ourselves through taking care of others? Sure. Those are real pressures that break groups down over and over and over again. And they can push out relationships that otherwise are really strong. And I think about that constantly, you know, like, how much time do you have to devote to a particular cause, and where does your own mental health fit into that, especially when you're doing really difficult work with people who have a lot at stake. If you're just listening in or just checking in, you're listening to Mic Check. I'm Michelle Morgan on 89.5 FM, and I am talking to Eamon Linehan, who is the coordinator for Free Artists New Haven. We've been talking a little bit about some of the projects that they've done over the past few years and the challenges of doing community arts projects outside of official institutions, and as well as working with people, especially youth, who have a lot of other challenges either at home or just more generally as far as structures of power go. I was thinking about New Haven and Free Artists as far as the more general national arts activist community, especially recently, like we see with the Women's March in Washington, all the posters that have come out of that. It feels like those part of what everybody really likes about, or maybe it's just me, but no, I don't think it's just me. Part of what people really like about the march, beyond the political movement of it, is you see the endless barrage or sort of replay of the posters that are there. You see the creativity that goes into protest. And I know, like, Wesleyan University just had recently, I believe, a exhibition of Occupy posters. Like, the Smithsonian was collecting the posters and the materials from the Occupy movement because they recognized that was political protest art, was part of something that was worth keeping and thinking about as a cohesive thing. And, you know, tell me what you think about that. Do you have any thoughts about that? Or, like, what do you have an archive of the materials? Like, what happens to the things that we make when we're done using them? And is there a promise for a community, or should there be a way for communities to archive their protest art?
Yeah, I definitely think that there should be a way to archive the artwork. One of the things that we used a lot in the past for marches and our collaborations with all different organizations and groups across the city and state were, this is going to sound silly to some of our listeners, but old billboard banner material, which was being a little bit of an eco-nut myself, was a nice way to keep a whole bunch of vinyl plastic out of the landfills and give it a new life, but also keep reusing it. That stuff doesn't break down, and using the same paints we would use for murals, we're able to make pieces that would last for years and years. And I still see from different collaborators mural banners that were made years ago still being used in, like, Hartford and Washington, and, like, that's really, really dope to see.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. So both sustainable materials in your art making, and also the reuse of them long term. This is something that national art movements, I think, tend to think about a lot, is like, how do we determine how well we're doing as arts programming? Like, it's such an intangible result. We think about, okay, if you want to measure the progress in a community on a particular issue, we have these measures, and we can measure from point A to point B, and we can see how far we've come. But it seems so much more difficult to do with arts programming. And what do you consider, like, a successful project?
I think when we think about arts programming, the way we're used to thinking about it as, like, the end project, if it's a community artwork piece, like that end thing, that it's harder to imagine. But when I spoke about mentoring, when I think about going back and talking to the same person for years and years and years, and even just seeing their face brighten up, like, hey, what are we going to get into today? Like, that really makes me feel good inside, and I feel success for that. Just as much as when I have had some more struggles with partners that some that I am, some that I'm not working with any longer, I see success there because we're actually getting to like the nitty gritty of it and like really beginning to work together, or not, in some cases. And especially when it comes to the youth, when we're doing a project, and it doesn't necessarily matter the medium that it's in, but when I see like a spark of like, hey, stuff can be better, I really feel like success from that, and that just like fills me with so much warmth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also the types of projects that you tend to take on or do, I know, introduce figures from history, activists, historical, social movements that youth might not otherwise be exposed to, and it's really their history. I'm thinking of the mural the one project that I participated in with you guys a few years ago was Denise Oliver, and she's now a professor, but she was with the Young Lords, and we did like a community project. It was just a mural of sorts. It was we all did pieces of, like, we took a big photo of her and it was divvied up into smaller pieces, and it was beautiful. It came out so wonderful, but also just seeing how many young people were involved in putting that together was really, really cool. And I know that these sorts of things happen all over the city and in Hartford and in Bridgeport as well. But how do you like go about deciding what figures you're gonna focus on, or what historical moments you're gonna focus on in your art projects, and what do you think that means to the youth involved?
I think it comes down over and over again to talking, right? And just being aware of what's going on in our city or the scope of the nation. And so it's always a collective decision. That project was the Cultural Justice Portrait Project, which was completed back in, what was that, 2017? No. Oh, gosh.
It's longer than that.
Getting old. Oh, gosh. And that was really, really fun for a lot of reasons. We were able to touch on representation. Representation when we looked at census data in the city, and what was like the type of what was the cultural representation when we look around to businesses and like the art that is around New Haven, or even like media, and then that overall look of the piece at the end came from breaking the final mural down initially into almost like a quilt. Everyone got a portion to work on, and only at the end everything came together. So it was really a surprise to everyone involved, and just how impactful it actually was.
That's great. You're listening to Mic Check. I'm Michelle Morgan, 89.5 FM, WPKN. I've been talking with Eamon Linehan about Free Artist New Haven. We'll only have a couple minutes left. We're going to be, Ralph Nader Radio Hour is on at 6. So just to finish up with you, Eamon, what are you working on now? What are you doing moving forward? What's in store for the next couple months, and where can our listeners get more information?
Sure. So as far as information, just to knock that out, we don't have a conventional website right now, but we've been really using the platform of Patreon and YouTube and also Instagram. They're all under the same name, Free Artists of New Haven, or Free Artists NHV, excuse me. People can check us out there. But I'm really excited for, right now we're moving into doing a monthly show that'll be really centered around mental health, and sort of be like if anyone's can remember Bob Ross and his sort of art show, which just brought creativity and made it accessible. We'll be featuring different artists with each episode, and just taking the real like trust and commitment it would take to like share someone else's story, and bring that forward as a really dope platform.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Again, you're listening to WPKN 89.5. I'm Michelle Morgan. You just heard Mic Check. Stay tuned for the Ralph Nader Radio Hour.